Tonight on The World, live from Jerusalem, public executions, arson attacks and gun battles inside Gaza as rival militias fight for dominance. Hamas tells Sky News it's attempting to restore law and order.
The security forces are carrying out their lawful duty to impose order and prevent anarchy, holding offenders accountable.
Israel and Hamas accuse each other of violating the ceasefire agreement as tensions rise over the return of the bodies of the remaining hostages. Amid calls for a massive surge in aid to be allowed into Gaza, a note of optimism tonight from the UN's humanitarian chief, who tells me they're turning the tide on the famine. Plus, we'll hear from the family of one of the Israeli hostages who was freed by Hamas this week. Also ahead, Donald Trump says he's agreed to meet Vladimir Putin in Hungary for talks on Ukraine as Volodymyr Zelensky heads to the White House. The head of MI5 warns of a sharp rise in state-sponsored threats, saying China operatives present a daily challenge to Britain's national security. Plus, the people dying in US immigration detention. We hear from the family of a man who moved to America as a child, who's died after being picked up in an ICE raid. Good evening from Jerusalem, where tonight Hamas has told Sky News that the group rejects claims that it has embarked on a campaign of violence since Israel's partial withdrawal from Gaza. It comes after the leader of a prominent Gazan family told us that Hamas has gone on a rampage, carrying out summary executions, shootings and gun attacks. A Hamas official has told us tonight that the group is attempting to restore law and order. The flare-up in violence comes as Palestinians wait for a surge in aid promised under the ceasefire agreement, with the UN saying they need to ensure their staff can work safely. Our international affairs editor, Dominic Waghorn, has this special report on the groups battling for control of Gaza. And just a warning, it contains distressing content.
1 week after a ceasefire was agreed, Gaza is plagued by a different kind of violence. Instead of fighting Israel, Palestinians are fighting Palestinians. Hamas is reasserting control, taking on its rivals and settling scores. On Friday, Israel withdrew its troops in Gaza back to this area in green, leaving the area in white, where Hamas is now trying to regain control. In places like Khan Yunis, where our team filmed armed Hamas fighters parading with their weapons on Monday.
We're still banned from going into Gaza, so we're trying to piece together, along with our team inside there, what is going on. And what seems clear is Hamas is taking on rival clans and militia.
Some of the most intense fighting has been between Hamas and the powerful Dogmush clan in a battle around an abandoned hospital here.
We've spoken to members of the Dogmush family who say Hamas came to arrest 4 of them, accusing them of collaborating with Israel. They refused to hand themselves in and opened fire instead, and in the ensuing fighting, the son of a senior Hamas leader was killed. The Dogmush family say they are now victims of a revenge campaign by Hamas.
An elder from the Dogmush family has told us that Hamas went on the rampage.
Hamas began a systematic destruction of properties, resources and homes in a terrifying way. I can understand when the occupation bombs houses, destroys resources and private property, it seeks displacement. But what I cannot understand is this deliberate destruction and burning of homes.
Other eyewitnesses have told Sky News Hamas destroyed several buildings in their battle with the Dogmush clan. This video, first shared on Saturday, shows a man being shot in the legs by gunmen at a nearby intersection. And on Monday, videos emerged from the same place showing the public execution of several men. Sky News has not been able to verify the identity of the victims.
The Dogmush family say at least 28 people were killed in the fighting, the most intense since Israeli troops withdrew from half of Gaza. Hamas seems to be trying to send a message to its rivals as it tries to reassert its authority.
Another Palestinian we spoke to who witnessed the fighting told us people in the area do not want Hamas to take back control.
سياسة الترهيب والنار رجعت 17 عاما إلى الخلف تقاتل وتدمر وترجع.
Hamas rules through fear and fire. It has taken us back 17 years, killing, destroying and terrorizing the Palestinian people. The Palestinian people want elections, parliamentary and presidential, with international supervision inside Gaza so that we can finally have legitimate leadership.
Hamas insists it is only enforcing law and order to prevent chaos in Gaza and is not settling old scores.
The security forces are carrying out their lawful duty to impose order and prevent anarchy, holding offenders accountable. The occupation, for its part, has formed armed militias loyal to it. These militias are accused of high treason, the most severe charge in Palestinian revolutionary law.
But President Trump's 20-point peace deal calls for the complete demilitarization of Gaza, and he's demanding Hamas gives up all its weapons before it's forced to.
We have told them we want to disarm, and they will disarm. And if they don't disarm, we will disarm them. And it'll happen quickly and perhaps violently.
This part of northern Gaza is still under Israeli military control, but in there, some Palestinian militia are setting themselves up, vowing to take on Hamas.
In the north of Gaza, controlled by Israel, is the base of Ashr al-Amansi and his militia opposed to Hamas. In the last 2 days, they've released videos showing off their fighters and weapons and pledging to block Hamas's control of Gaza. Hamas, their commander says, is a terrorist movement. Its fighters will be dealt with as collaborators. And in the south of Gaza, also in the Israeli-controlled area, the stronghold of Yasser Abu Shabab. Last week, a Sky News investigation revealed that Israel was helping Abu Shabab smuggle weapons, cars and cash into Gaza. The IDF had no response to our allegations, but Abu Shabab's power is thought to be drawn from protection from the Israeli army and control of a key aid route. The people of Gaza are now spared the horrors of war with Israel, but now face the spectre of a civil war instead. The United Nations says the fighting between Palestinians is hampering the effort to get aid in.
We also need to be able to operate in an environment where our trucks and our staff and our teams are not at risk from fighting and not at risk from looting from armed elements as well.
Under international law, Israel is responsible for all of Gaza, even the part it's withdrawn from. What isn't clear is how much it is deliberately stoking division between the rival Palestinian factions, aiming to divide and rule, as it has in the past.
Either way, the spiralling violence underlines the urgent need for an international security force proposed in the Trump peace plan to be sent into Gaza. So far, there's little sign of that happening. Dominic Waghorn, Sky News, Jerusalem.
Well, tonight the fragility of the ceasefire has been drawn into focus as Hamas and Israel accuse each other of violating the truce. Only 9 of the 28 dead hostages have been handed back, sparking anger in Israel. Hamas has told Sky News it remains committed to the agreement and will work to find the remaining bodies. Israel has responded by limiting much-needed aid from entering the enclave, keeping the major Rafah crossing with Egypt closed. More on that in just a moment when we hear from the UN aid chief, Tom Fletcher. But first, here's what Hamas told us about work they're doing to ensure the ceasefire holds.
Hamas is committed to every detail of the agreement, especially the first stage, delivering all Israeli captives, both alive and deceased. All living captives were handed back, and part of the bodies were as well. As for the rest, there are enormous difficulties because the occupation deliberately killed them and bombed sites with very powerful explosives that vaporized parts of captives and detainees. There has been massive destruction across Gaza. Neighborhoods' landmarks have changed completely. We explained to the mediators from the outset the difficulties of retrieving the bodies after all this devastation. They understood. We even heard from US President Trump that he acknowledged the difficulties of this issue, saying Hamas is indeed digging to retrieve them and that the movement shows a genuine intention to fulfill the agreement and hand over all remains to the occupation.
Dominic Waghorn joins me now, and Dominic, it's all a clear sign that Hamas lives on and is battling to reassert control.
Very much so, Mark, yes, and they've clearly been out in force. As soon as the ceasefire was agreed, they were out being filmed by our cameras and others, parading their fighters and their weapons, and they've been out in force, particularly in the north of the area that the Israelis have vacated, where the Dogmush clan were based, and they had an intense battle with them that by some reports is still going on, but at least 28 people have been killed there. And also we've had these gruesome pictures, of course, of Hamas fighters out carrying out summary executions on the streets of Gaza City in a similar area, actually, to where that battle happened. So Hamas is trying to reassert its control. Meanwhile, other groups have been springing up in the area that Israel controls, apparently tolerated by the Israelis. The Israelis have a long-standing policy and sort of custom of trying to divide and rule the Palestinians that goes back years and was part of their policy during this war, funding and supporting various groups. But they seem to be continuing that by, it seems, funding these groups, but also allowing them to spring up now and broadcast these videos where they are expressing defiance against Hamas. In a sense, Mark, I think what we're seeing is the drawback of Donald Trump's innovative diplomacy, where his team agreed to agree on what can be agreed, to try and form an agreement on things like hostage and prisoner exchanges, a ceasefire, and plans to get aid in, while leaving the trickier stuff, which is how do you actually impose and maintain security in Gaza, and then what kind of governing body can be imposed in Gaza, leave that for later on, which means those issues, particularly the security force, probably won't be settled for weeks or months to come. And we already have now, you know, it seems delays, issues to do with the number of bodies that Hamas is returning, but also Israel shooting a number of Palestinians simply for coming or heading towards Israeli soldiers. That threatens not just the ceasefire, but also diplomacy towards settling those other more tricky issues. And the problem for Gazans is that if the security force isn't able to go in, get trained and then get deployed, and it looks like it's going to be possibly months before that happens, then this vacuum remains to be filled by Hamas, these other groups. There's more chaos, it's harder to get aid into Gaza, and obviously it's endangering Gaza as well. They're not dying in the numbers they were during the war, but this is a real problem for Gaza, and the effort to try and bring security to the Strip is not going to be settled by the international community, led by the Americans, it seems, for weeks, probably months to come.
Dominic, thank you very much indeed. Well, it's clear spending time in this part of the world, the human toll of war, and this war in particular, has been catastrophic, and there is a desperate need for infrastructure and aid right across the border in the Gaza Strip. The UN's humanitarian chief, Tom Fletcher, visited the Rafah crossing today, and speaking a short time ago, I began by asking about the work they're doing to get aid across the border.
So I'm still here actually in Al Arish, just up the road from Rafah, where I'm overseeing the coordination of what we hope is going to be a massive surge in humanitarian aid over the days and weeks to come. We've had some good days now. We're getting those truck numbers up, but we need this to be sustained. We need thousands of trucks getting in every day. We need all the crossings open, and we need the bureaucratic obstacles lifted. It's been a really, really encouraging few days. We're heading in the right direction. No one said this would be easy or uncomplicated, but the trajectory is good.
Encouraging, even if the Israelis are saying very clearly that when Rafah opens, it will open for people, not for aid.
So at the moment, we're waiting on that announcement of when pedestrians can start using the Rafah pedestrian crossing again. We've got a crossing just to the side of that, through which we go towards Kerem Shalom. And so that's where I've been monitoring the trucks going in today and saw many of our trucks going through. You know, in just one day this week, we fed almost 1 million people inside Gaza, distributed almost 1 million meals inside Gaza. And so we're getting those stocks in, we're getting the medical supplies in, we're getting fuel in, cooking gas for the first time in months. You know, we've been saying for ages, you know, you've heard me saying it before, we've got to get in, we've got to deliver. We've been desperate to get to this point. We've got 190,000 metric tons ready to go in. And finally, we're seeing that delivery, and we're determined to save as many lives as we can.
There have been restrictions over the last few days in relation to the Israeli response to the hostage bodies and problems with that. Does that worry you that aid could still be used as a weapon, as a bargaining chip in these disputes?
That's always a worry everywhere we work, and aid must never be a bargaining chip. We shouldn't have to ask for access. We shouldn't have to make deals to get our aid through. So there are real risks. You know, I was in Sharm el-Sheikh earlier this week for that big meeting of world leaders. And what came through really clearly was this unequivocal support for our humanitarian effort, for the 60-day plan we've laid out to get as much aid in as possible where it's desperately, desperately needed. But we know that there'll be bumps in the road. There'll be good days and bad days. And, you know, that's why I'm here, in order to have those tough conversations and get as much through as possible.
Our lead story, Tom, is about the violence, the lawlessness, the executions, the violence between the Hamas and the other gangs. I just wonder how much concern do you have that might affect your ability to distribute aid to where it's really needed?
So this will be another big challenge, and it's one we anticipated. We knew that things were at risk of breaking down on the security side. Clearly, civilians have got to be protected. That's one of our demands. But we work in pretty lawless places around the world. This is what we do everywhere we work. So we've got the systems in place. We've got the networks. We've got community trust. We know how to do this, where to do this. We'll take the precautions we need. This is a very, very dangerous place to work. We've lost hundreds of colleagues over the last 2 years already. So we know the risks we run, but we're determined to get this aid through.
The key, obviously, is that this ceasefire lasts, because this is your chance now, isn't it, to get some real aid in. Would you plead to the Israelis to allow more aid in than just that, you know, sticking to the agreement?
I mean, we'd like unhindered access and unlimited aid. We also want the commercial traffic to be moving as well, because ultimately that's the way that you rebuild the economy of Gaza and start to get us in a position where we can think about physically rebuilding Gaza. A lot of what we're doing is clearing roads right now so that we can shift the aid that we have waiting at the borders as border crossings open, as we are urging Israel to allow us to do. So there's a lot more we'd like to do, but you know, I'm glass half full right now. This is a much, much better position than we were in last week. And as a result, we are saving lives and we are getting food in kids' bellies. We're getting kids are sleeping under shelter for the first time in months. They're going to start getting back into school. So there is real progress here. And I'm going to keep focusing on that and keep trying to manage the practical problems that are placed in front of us.
Now, point 7 of the Trump plan, upon acceptance of the agreement, full aid will be immediately sent into the Gaza Strip. Now, we know there's been problems with that in terms of the restrictions, but it also talks, Tom, about immediate rehabilitation of infrastructure, water, electricity, sewage, rehabilitation of hospitals and bakeries. Is that, to your knowledge, starting to happen?
Yes. We've got hundreds of bakeries reopened, which is why we're able to feed so many people at the moment. 500,000 of these bread packs that we make on the spot, put together in a day just this week and distributed. So that infrastructure, that essential infrastructure, is being rebuilt. The health service will take longer, but my WHO, World Health Organization colleagues are in and are starting that vital work. You know, I'm in regular contact several times a day with the White House as we try to implement this program. They are being absolutely clear with us that they want us to deliver at scale, at massive volume, and that they are rock solid behind us in that effort. There will then be this much tougher job of the long-term rebuilding of Gaza. I've been talking to the Egyptian foreign minister in Cairo over the last few days about a big conference that's coming up on how to do that. But my immediate priority is saving as many lives as we can with the money that we have, which is limited, and in the conditions we face, which, as you say, are grim.
Do you think that President Trump has the commitment to see the next phase of his own framework through?
I think there is enormous voltage coming through the system behind this agreement. It's very clear that the American government is hugely mobilized to deliver it and to work with us to deliver the humanitarian aspects of it. That's a sea change, really, in how we're working. I'm feeling the difference in that since the deal was agreed, since the deal was signed. Obviously, I hope that attention and engagement, the energy is sustained, but I'm certainly seeing it so far.
I've not heard you sound this optimistic, for many months for obvious reasons, because the war was going on. There is now a ceasefire. That optimism, presumably, is based on a hope rather than, any certain knowledge that this is going to last. This is a window you really have to take advantage of, isn't it?
Absolutely, which is why I've stayed here in the region. It's why we're working around the clock, why we're getting our best people onto this. We're working across the UN family, across the NGO community, as well as one unit to absolutely deliver. The Palestinians have waited so long for this moment. We've waited months for this moment. The reason I'm more optimistic right now, more hopeful, is because we are delivering so much more than we could do over many, many months now, really since the ceasefire, the last ceasefire back in the early days of this year. So we're turning the tide on the famine. We're turning the tide on the massive humanitarian challenges that we face there. It will take time and energy and patience, but these have been a better few days, and we are going to build on them. And every day that we get more aid in has a multiplier effect. It means we can get more fuel in, we can get the power working, we can get the water back on. We can start to rebuild not just Gaza, but rebuild a sense of hope among the Palestinian people there.
That was Tom Fletcher speaking to me a little earlier. Now, all of the 20 remaining living hostages held by Hamas were freed this week as part of the ceasefire agreement. Among them was Omri Miran, who was taken from his home by Hamas fighters just over 2 years ago on October the 7th. He was reunited with his wife and daughters on Monday after being released. Well, let's speak now to Moshe Lavi, who's the brother-in-law of Omri. Thank you very much, first of all, for being with us. And I just wonder, how is your brother-in-law? How is Omri?
Omri is getting better by the day. We were told by former captivity survivors that their recovery was rather quick, within days, and they were able to get the light back into their hearts, the color into their face. And we see the same with Omri at the moment. He's still in the hospital. We are with him, and he's going through tests and different treatments. And obviously, we are hoping that we can bring him actually home to our temporary home in Kibbutz Kramim very soon.
Right, and just describe how special was the moment when the family was reunited?
I think that was the happiest moment in my life, in my family members' life. Just seeing him embracing my sister Lishai, hugging the girls and playing with them within hours, as if nothing has changed ever since October the 7th. It was the same Omri I remember from October the 6th. I was so emotional when I finally got to meet him later on that evening on Monday, hug him, speak with him, hear about his terrible experiences in Hamas captivity, but also about the way our advocacy work reached Hamas's tunnels and helped him during his ordeal under Hamas captivity.
Moshe, what did he say about the way he was treated while in captivity?
I'm going to respect Omri's wishes. He asked us not to share any specific details about his captivity until he's ready, if he will be ready to share it. I don't think it was very different from what I've heard from other captivity survivors with whom I advocated over the past few months in Washington, D.C. Situation was dire. And they underwent torture, starvation, and deprivation of a lot of basic human rights like water, sanitary, and sunlight It wasn't different for Omri, but I can't go into details, I'm afraid.
No, I understand that, and I'm sure the viewers will understand that too. So just, you touched on it there. What is the immediate future? What is the kind of treatment that he will be undertaking, presumably physical, but also for the trauma?
Yes, you pointed out correctly. I think we can heal very quickly from physical wounds, as much as, of course, how severe they are. And luckily, he returned to us without severe physical wounds. Many of them were already healed during his time in captivity. But the mental scars remain with captivity survivors for so long. And I'm sure it's going to be a long process with professionals, that already started in hospital, but will only intensify alongside his physiotherapy over the next couple of months. And I truly believe that Omri, because of his training as a shiatsu therapist, because of his spirituality and resilience, he will be able to recover from many of those emotional scars. But of course, he will forever remain in those tunnels. It will be part of his past, part of his identity. But we are looking to the future, looking on how we can support him as much as possible, support my sister Lishai and my two nieces, Ronnie and Alma, ensure that they find a home after they've been displaced for so long, and start a new life, a life that finally we reach October 8th, 2023 in our family. We've lived on October 7th for 2 years, and for Omri and all of us, it's a new start.
Yeah, absolutely. What does he know about the full scale of, does he know about the full scale of the horror that occurred on October the 7th?
He wasn't aware of the scale completely. He knew that a lot has happened. He witnessed it himself in Kibbutz Nahal Oz, from where he was kidnapped from his home by Hamas terrorists, but he wasn't aware of the number of hostages and the number of casualties that day, and I don't think he was completely aware of how severe the situation was ever since. But as I said, we're trying and focus on the ways to heal him. And one of the most important things is to ensure that he has the right to choose what he wants to hear, what he wants to share, and of course, more trivial things like what he wants to eat, etc. He was deprived of that right for 2 years, and so we're taking things step by step, not overwhelming him, and focusing on his rehabilitation. I'm sure he will try and learn more and more over the next few months or years, just like we will try and learn a bit of his suffering in captivity as we feel more comfortable sharing those feelings and experiences.
And just finally, Moshe, what are your thoughts about the dead hostages, many of whom still remain in Gaza, and what those families are going through? Because I know there's one thing that's come through is this real togetherness of all the families involved in this.
Yes, over the past 2 years, I've gotten to know so many good new friends from other families of hostages. In the past year as well, I've gotten to learn about captivity survivors who became very close to me, including Keith Siegel, who spent time with Omri in captivity and became very close to our family. As my sister said at a press conference 2 days ago, we are going to continue supporting families of hostages. There are 19 in number, 19 hostages who are still held captive. For us, the deceased hostages are as important, both from a Jewish perspective of burial in the land of Israel and an Israeli perspective as part of our ethos, our social ethos, of serving in a mandatory army, of having a bond, a national and spiritual and cultural bond to each other. And so we'll continue to fight for them, but we'll do it in the ways the remaining families ask us to do, not at the forefront, unless they'll ask us to be there, And I'm fully committed to ensure that those 19 hostages are not forgotten. They're part of my family, part of our quest as a family. And I hope the international community will continue to pressure Hamas and all the relevant stakeholders to ensure all those hostages are found and released, and if need be, excavate throughout Gaza to find them.
Well, listen, we appreciate your time. And by the way, I spoke last night on the programme to Ella Hamey, who is a widow who is waiting for her husband's body to come out of Gaza. And I know she mentioned actually how appreciative she had been of the support of all the families who have been involved in this. So, look, we wish.
And that's why we held posters
well.
of the.
And,
sorry. I just want to add that's why we held posters of remaining hostages. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And listen, thank you very much for coming on, and we wish your brother-in-law the very best.
Thank you so much. Have a good night.
And you. Right, to the White House now, where President Trump is speaking. He's been speaking about the Middle East and also about Ukraine.
Well, I'm looking at what's happening, and that wasn't the deal that was made, and we'll see what happens. It's calmed down. It's a tough neighborhood. We know that. We have a commitment from them, and I assume they're going to honor that commitment. I hope they do. And I understand they brought back some additional bodies today. It's a rough deal when you think of it, right? Very rough. We have our hostages back completely. We were very lucky with that. But it's a tough situation. They brought back bodies today, as you probably know. But they also said they're going to behave. We're going to find out if they behave. If they behave, good. If they don't behave, we'll take care of it. Yeah, please.
Following up on that, when you
I didn't say you.
Mr.
You CNN, fake news. Go ahead.
You said in your post that if they kept killing people in Gaza, we would have no choice but to go in and kill them. So do you mean U.S. forces would go in and take out Hamas?
No, I didn't say who would go in, but somebody will go in. It's not going to be us. We won't have to. There are people very close, very nearby that will go in. They'll do the trick very easily, but under our auspices.
Could I follow up? You also posted about your call with President Putin today, and you spoke about the meeting in Hungary with him. Do you have a timeline or a date set for when?
Yeah, I would say within 2 weeks or so. Pretty quick. Marco Rubio is going to be meeting with his counterpart, as you know, Lavrov, and they'll be meeting pretty soon. They're going to set up a time and a place very shortly. Maybe it's already set up. They've already spoken. And I thought it was a very good phone call. I thought very productive. But I'll be meeting with President Putin, and we'll make a determination. Tomorrow I'm meeting with President Zelensky, and I'll be telling him about the call. I mean, we have a problem. They don't get along too well, those two, and it's sometimes tough to have meetings, so we may do something where we're separate but equal. We'll meet and talk to parties, but this is a terrible relationship the two of them have, and it's one of those things. I've seen things that nobody would believe, but this is one of them. So we're going to be meeting in Hungary. Viktor Orban is going to be hosting, and it's really something that's time. Last week, over 7,000 people were killed. That's ridiculous. And, you know, it doesn't affect our country. We're not losing people. We're not losing Bobby. We're not losing Americans. But they're losing Russians, Ukrainians, mostly soldiers, for the most part, soldiers. And we think we're going to get it. We hope we're going to get it stopped. I thought this would be, because of my relationship with President Putin, I thought this would be very quick. And it's turned out to be, who would think I did Middle East before I did this? We did a total of 8 now, 7 and now 8. And we're going to make this number 9.
Yeah, please. Sir, you said you posted that there was great progress. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Was it a shift in Putin's tone? Was it something new he told you? Did he give you any message to give?
You're talking about the whole
President Zelensky tomorrow?
It just seems to me that, you know, look, it's only a field. That's all I've done in my whole life. I've made deals. I know about deals. I do it well. I don't think any president's ever ended a war, frankly. One war, I did 8 of them, Maria, right? And but I don't know, did Bush ever end? Do you think Biden ended a war? Biden started wars because he was stupid. But do you think Biden ended any wars? No, I don't know of anybody that ended wars. I ended 8 of them, and it's going to be 9. I think we're going to have this one done, hopefully soon. But I'll be meeting him probably over the next 2 weeks. First, Marco is going to be meeting. And the vice president, as you know, is very much involved. The whole team is involved. Steve Witkoff will be involved. Yeah, please.
What did you tell them about the Tomahawks? Did you discuss the Tomahawk missiles? Did you discuss?
Well, we talked about it a little bit. Didn't say much, but I do say to you, you know, we need Tomahawks for the United States of America too. We have a lot of them, but we need them. I mean, we can't deplete for our country. So, you know, they're very vital. They're very powerful. They're very accurate. They're very good, but we need them too. So I don't know what we can do about that.
Why do you think a second meeting with Putin? Why do you think a second meeting with Putin now will yield different results?
Well, I think Alaska actually set a stage, and that wasn't very long ago, but it set a stage. You have to understand, I came into this situation. I didn't start this war. This is a Biden deal. And I came into it, and it was a mess. It could have led to World War III. In my opinion, this could have led to World War III. That won't happen, but it could have. So I came in, this war was raging. When I left, this wasn't even a thought. For 4 years, nobody talked about it. I spoke to President Putin about Ukraine. It was the apple of his eye, but there was never going to be doing anything like this. And this all went because of some really bad decisions that were made. And look what you have. You have millions of people dead. You have just a horrible, horrible situation. I'm doing it to save souls. That's all I'm doing it for. I'm not doing it for us. We have an ocean between us. I'm doing it also to help Europe. They want to have it ended, but they're unable to do it. I'm able to do it. So I think we'll be successful. We'll save a lot of lives. It should have been done. Should have never started. This would have never happened if the election weren't rigged. This would have never happened. But it did happen, and I'll get it stopped. Okay.
There we are, President Trump there speaking to the White House in the last few minutes. Let's speak to our US correspondent, David Blevins in Washington. Well, David, this is quite remarkable, isn't it? And things are moving so quickly. We could be looking here at 2 Trump-Putin summits in a matter of what, little over 2 months?
Yes, incredible. When Donald Trump met Vladimir Putin in Alaska, it was the first meeting between a US president and a Russian president in 4 years. And as you say, 2 months later, we're now looking at the possibility of a sequel. The 2 leaders spoke on the telephone for about 2.5 hours today, ending in agreement relating to their officials meeting next week and a second meeting between them, this time in Hungary, in the coming days. Now, this comes at a time when Volodymyr Zelensky, the Ukrainian president, is touching down in Washington for a meeting with Donald Trump tomorrow. And so there was some speculation, perhaps, that Volodymyr Zelensky could be invited to Hungary as well. But as you've just heard from Donald Trump, he says Zelensky and Putin have a terrible relationship and that they will probably, the meetings he will have with them will probably be separate but equal. Zelensky's coming to Washington seeking Tomahawk cruise missiles for Ukraine, and there'd been lots of speculation that the US government was going to grant him access to those. But again, Donald Trump seems to be pouring scorn on that suggestion, suggesting in the last few minutes that the US needs those Tomahawk cruise missiles and they cannot afford for their reserves to deplete. So we're in very interesting ground here, because it looks like Zelensky's going back to the White House for another very tricky meeting tomorrow. Donald Trump says he didn't imagine he would be able to resolve the Middle East first, and believes that could now have a knock-on effect in terms of Ukraine. So he very much seems to be one man on a mission to end 2 different wars, Mark.
Absolutely. David, thank you very much. Let's speak now to Lesia Veselenko, who's a member of the Ukrainian Parliament. Good evening. Thank you very much for being with us. And I wonder, are you encouraged that President Trump and Putin could well be sitting down together again within the next couple of weeks.
Good evening. It will be another set of discussions that President Trump and President Putin will have. As President Trump has just said in the previous piece, he is a negotiator. He knows how to make deals. He's a businessman, and he's pretty much approaching this situation as a business deal, whereas it's a breach of international law, and we're dealing here with one aggressor state and with the international community still in the 13th year of aggression and 4th year of full-scale aggression, not being able to respond properly.
Do you worry that one minute it seemed President Trump was threatening Vladimir Putin, or certainly getting tougher with Vladimir Putin, and now he's issuing these Truth Social posts in which he seems, again, very favourable, quite warm towards the Russian leader?
I believe that President Trump is, again, deploying negotiation tactics and warming up I would like to say the opponent, but the interlocutor to have a better conversation with him. It's a question about what is happening behind those closed doors. What is President Trump discussing with Putin? What is there to discuss? It's rightly said that putting together in the same room President Zelensky and Vladimir Putin will lead to nothing, because it's on the one side you will have an international criminal, on the other side you will have the legitimate president of a democratic country who is fighting and doing his best to make sure that the country remains independent, sovereign, and a democracy.
Of course, it could be President Putin playing President Trump again with the concern that Tomahawk missiles were about to be given to Ukraine. He might be wanting to delay that decision, push everything back, and just, persuade Donald Trump that actually there's other benefits in a relationship with Russia, like trade and so forth. Are you concerned about that?
The Tomahawk missiles piece is very interesting indeed. The fact is, Ukraine needs more weapons, and Europe needs more weapons and weapon systems to be able to protect itself from the aggression which Russia is waging, and which Russia is clearly interested in increasing and expanding, if not stopped. And who can stop Russia? It certainly can't be just the one country, Ukraine, or a small group of countries, Ukraine plus the Baltics and some Eastern European states. It really needs to be the whole international community coming in and standing up against aggression, which is an internationally recognized crime. How can we do this? We can only do this by force, because diplomacy so far has failed. And the UN Charter clearly prescribes that if there is an act of aggression, an act of force, that the country who is victim and also the international community have the right, or rather even the obligation, to counter that aggression and to bring an end to it. Again, here is where the Tomahawk missiles play a large role, and the President Trump has just said that the US needs them themselves. This means only one thing, that there needs to be an increased production of the Tomahawk missiles, but also of the other weapons and weapon systems that are needed to contain the aggression, to push back on it. And it needs to happen not just in the US, but it needs to happen in all NATO member states and EU member states. And also Ukraine needs to be allowed and supported with the capacities to produce our own defense systems.
And just finally, just a minute left, I'm afraid, but Zelensky is going to the White House tomorrow. What do you think he should be saying to President Trump?
Well, definitely emphasizing again that Ukraine needs to remain intact territorially, that Ukraine needs to regain its territories, that Ukraine needs to remain a democracy, a sovereign country. There can be no giving ins to the aggressor. Anything that we give to Russia now will only ignite more aggressive wars across the world. Let's not forget about China, the situation in Southeast Asia. All of these countries are watching what will happen to Russia. Will Russia actually be paying for the act of aggression, or will it be something that the world will just let go of? And that will lead to further consequences in other regions of the world, and that needs to be very clearly stated to the President of the United States. And of course, there needs to be asks for more sanctions and for more weapons.
Lesia Veselenko, thank you very much for being with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just some breaking news, and it is that Justice Department officials, in the United States are telling NBC News, our partner, that the former Trump National Security Advisor, the man you see there, John Bolton, has been indicted by a federal grand jury, charged in an investigation into the apparent or alleged mishandling of classified information. So John Bolton, the latest, what should we say, Trump opponent, really, we can call him. He did work for Trump, but has subsequently departed the White House in the first Trump administration and has since been a critic of Trump's. He has now been indicted. Not long ago, James Comey, the FBI man, also considered an opponent of Trump. He was also indicted. So there we are. John Bolton, the latest to be indicted. Now, elsewhere today, and the head of MI5 has warned Russia, Iran and China are behind a dramatic rise in threats to the United Kingdom from foreign state actors. Sir Ken McCullum revealed his agency disrupted a plot linked to Beijing in the past week, while also admitting his frustration at the collapse of the trial of those two men accused of spying for China. Our security and defence editor, Deborah Haynes, has this report.
Stepping out of the shadows to warn about threats amid a very public outcry over the collapse of a China spy trial.
The UK-China relationship is, by its nature, complex, but MI5's role is not. We detect and deal robustly with activity threatening UK national security. Our track record is strong. We've intervened operationally again just in the last week, and we will keep doing so. I am MI5 born and bred. I will never back off from confronting threats to the UK wherever they come from.
Yet backing off is exactly what prosecutors did when they dropped the case against two British men accused of spying for China. Former parliamentary researcher Christopher Cash and teacher Christopher Berry deny wrongdoing. The failure to prosecute clearly painful.
Yes, we are frustrated when those things don't happen. Like, this is not unique. There are sometimes reasons why prosecutions don't work. But the key thing for us to do is to disrupt threats, and that's what we've done.
In an annual speech, Sir Ken McCullum warned that threats from China, as well as Russia and Iran, are escalating.
In the last year, we've seen a 35% increase in the number of individuals we're investigating for involvement in state threat activity. That means espionage, including against our parliament, our universities, our critical infrastructure. But now, states are also consistently descending into ugly methods MI5 is more used to seeing in our terrorism casework.
It's not just hostile states trying to inflict harm. The MI5 boss offered his sympathies to those impacted by the Manchester synagogue terrorist attack.
In 2025, MI5 is contending with more volume and more variety of threat from terrorists and state actors than I've ever seen.
China denied allegations of spying.
We have noted the relevant situation. China's position is very clear. We firmly oppose hyping up so-called espionage activities to smear and vilify China. Such accusations are pure slander. We urge the relevant British individuals to stop making unfounded hype and cease political manipulation.
It can't have been comfortable delivering a speech like this in the middle of the spy trial storm, with opposition MPs accusing the government of interfering in the case to protect trading ties with Beijing. is perhaps why the head of MI5 chose his words carefully. He said Chinese state actors pose a threat to national security every day. But when it comes to wider foreign policy on Beijing, well, that's a matter for ministers. A delicate balancing act as MI5 navigates what it describes as a new era of threat. Deborah Haynes, Sky News.
Now to a developing story tonight, and the Prime Minister has weighed in on a decision to ban Israeli football fans from next month's Maccabi Tel Aviv match against Aston Villa in Birmingham over safety concerns, labelling it the wrong decision. Police say it was based partly on what happened in Amsterdam last year when the club's fans were the target of anti-Semitic attacks. Our sports correspondent Rob Harris joins me now. Good evening, Rob. What has the Prime Minister been saying?
Well, he's responded to what had become an escalating diplomatic row, because after this announcement earlier today from the council in Birmingham that Israeli fans would be banned from following Maccabi Tel Aviv to the Europa League match against Aston Villa in 3 weeks, it led to the Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Saar calling it a shameful decision, saying, "I call on the UK authorities to reverse this cowardly decision." Well, within hours, we have heard now from the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, who said this is the wrong decision. We will not tolerate anti-Semitism on our streets. The role of the police is to ensure all football fans can enjoy the game without fear of violence or intimidation. The police had apparently told the Birmingham City Council Safety Advisory Group that there were concerns there could be arrest if there were protests that were expected around the stadium, also in the city of Birmingham as well. And that led to the campaign against anti-Semitism in the UK, saying it's an alarming sign of how British authorities are failing to ensure that Jews can't participate safely and equally in public life. And they were saying about, instead of controlling the anti-Semitic hatred, that's made it unsafe for Israeli fans to attend. The response is to exclude the victims. Of course, this coming 2 weeks after the deadly terror attack at the synagogue in Manchester. And Keir Starmer himself had been trying to reassure the Jewish community here just earlier today that the government would do everything to protect them. Now, there has been a growing focus on the participation of Israeli teams in sporting events. Sky News revealed there were moves to ban Israeli teams from international competitions, but the bid for a vote was abandoned after I revealed the Trump administration said they would intervene to stop Israel being banned. And then there was the accelerated moves for a peace process and the decision that we saw reached earlier this week in the region.
OK, Rob, thank you very much indeed. Now, in the 10 months since President Trump returned to the White House, more than 200,000 immigrants have been arrested. It's fueled unrest in major cities and concerns about the conditions people are being held in. Those concerns have been heightened by the deaths of at least 16 people in detention. Our US correspondent, Martha Kellner, has this report.
A final goodbye for a man who died after being detained in Donald Trump's immigration raids. The tears of a mother who says the US government has taken a piece of her heart away. Her son Ishmael was being held at an immigration detention centre when he fell ill. His condition was flagged as potentially life-threatening. He was treated by medics, then returned to his cell. 3 days later, Ishmael was dead, aged 39. His death raises questions about the conditions inside the centre he was held and whether a sudden surge of immigrants being detained by this administration has left the system stretched beyond breaking point. Ishmael was Lucia's first child. They spoke regularly while he was detained. She says that the final time they spoke, he had a persistent fever. He said they were not listening to him, she tells me. He was scheduled to have surgery to remove an abscess in hospital, but the family was never told.
I feel like just any day he could come home, but I know he's not.
His brother, Jose, says they learned of Ishmael's death from police.
They're the ones that notified us that he had passed. We were not even aware that he was in the hospital or even had a scheduled surgery.
The ICE detention centre didn't get in touch with you to tell you that he'd been taken to the hospital?
Not at all.
Jose believes Ismail would still be alive had he not been taken by immigration officials.
He got sick while in detention, and they did not seem to take care of him.
Ismail moved to the US from Mexico with his family, aged 4. He did have protected status granted to childhood arrivals, but that was removed after he got a conviction for drunk driving. He worked at a car wash and was a prominent member of the Latino community here. Campaigners say Ismail's death shouldn't be viewed in isolation.
This administration's main goal is to harm, to torture individuals and to try to force them out. The great increase we see in human rights abuses, in deaths, is a direct result of the administration's decision to pack these detention centers as much as they can.
In a statement, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency said comprehensive medical care is provided from the moment individuals arrive and throughout the entirety of their stay. At no time during detention is a detained illegal alien denied emergency care. The Trump administration says they're targeting criminals and people in the US illegally. The official cause of Ismail's death is still under investigation. As this family absorbs their loss, immigration raids continue and the number of people detained is increasing all the time. Martha Kellner, Sky News, Los Angeles.
And there we are, an extraordinary week in the Middle East, and now President Trump is turning his attention to Ukraine and maybe a second summit with President Putin. News at 10 is next.
I witnessed the complete destruction of a place linked to my childhood memories.
This is insane.
I'm Yusra Al-Bagher, Sky's Africa correspondent based in Johannesburg, South Africa. I felt awe when we saw the mountain gorillas in Rwanda.
We call him the king of the jungle. This is the alpha silverback.
Sky News, get the full story first.
I'm Dominic Waghorn, Sky's International Affairs Editor, covering a world that seems to be unravelling.
It's not his country, it's ours.
Sky News, the full story first, free wherever you get your news. It's half an hour now past the deadline that Hamas issued, and we've now seen a third barrage of rockets coming in.